What do you feel like made you like that kind of like character where if you don't see a way, if you don't
Mm,
like your current circumstances and you don't
mm,
see another option, that you
mm,
just like you just conclude to make your own. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, Even as you ask, so as you ask the question, like three things kind of come to mind. I think one
Mm.
is I have very low requirements for life.
What do you mean by
So like, I think one of the tremendous blessings of growing up low socioeconomic status
Uh-huh.
is that you never really had the opportunity to have what do they call it, like life inflation.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't need a lot of things in life.
What is life inflation? Tell me a little bit
I
about that.
like where as you make more money, like you start like buying more things, you need more things in life. You start enjoying certain comforts
Uh-huh.
and they become a necessity in your life versus just
Mm.
like a comfortable, like nice thing to have.
Oh, I see. I
And I
see.
think like I just like never got to that place in my and like so for most of my life, like
Uh-huh.
all I lived on was just kind of like just the bare necessity. Do I just have enough to maybe like put clothes on my back, have a roof over my head, and like food on the
Wow.
table?
Wow.
And like I don't need to eat out. I don't need a big space. I don't need to like be comfortable, look nice, all of these things. Like and so like just because cut like I know that I can be happy and I can survive on very low income.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that's also just been a tradition, like big blessing when it comes to taking risks,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that like even if it's only a little bit and if all things fail, I know the worst case scenario is
Mm.
actually not that bad.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's one. I
Okay.
think the second one is also just like knowing that there's no like growing up, I didn't even know that there, when you go to college or like when you go elsewhere, like people talk about resources that are available to you. I had no
Okay.
idea what that meant. Like going taking advantage of resources.
Uh-huh.
Um, I just kind of like all through like just in like middle school, high school, just kind of like study, like you figure out your own way, right? You
Mm-hmm.
learn to compete. Like even if some other kid, like their parents are professors at a university or they
Yeah.
come from like wealthier backgrounds and they get help on the
Yeah.
college admissions process or things
Yeah.
like that. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, I just have to figure this out on my own and like be
Uh-huh.
scrappy, ask my sisters or like ask people at church,
Uh-huh.
ask like other people and just kind of like learn to figure out the game as you go.
Uh-huh.
I think just being trained in that just from a young age, because there's not like nothing is going to get spoon fed to you. I think that's
Uh-huh.
like the other bit that just like teaches kind of grit, I guess,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
go. And then there was a third thing, but then I forgot.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. It'll come back to you. So let's summarize. So first one was low living requirements. So like keep your liabilities low. Like so like worst case scenario, you don't make an income, you only need to rack up like 1,500 a month to survive, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like for example, I'm not
Mm.
saying that's you, but like
No, yeah,
um,
I think that's around the right number though.
oh really,
Yeah.
1,500?
But then it depends on the rent, right? Like if the rent is
Oh,
like
yeah.
is like over 1,000,
Oh
then
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a little hard. But
So it's like
like-
500 plus rent. That's your minimum.
yeah, 500 plus rent is just around my sweet spot. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then number 2 was create your own. It sounded like create your own advantage. Like other people
Yeah.
have like different advantages in life. Like
Yeah.
create your own advantage and create your own like little sweet spot is what you're kind of getting at,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like your own like differentiation. Like what makes you stand out and like what is your like
Mm.
field of expertise based on your like
Mm.
unique background and like set of gifting talents and like opportunities
Yeah,
to create
yeah.
your own like space.
Yeah,
right?
and like and figure out the rules of the game on your own, like and
Mm.
just kind of like figure out and be scrappy, yeah, and figuring out how the game is played so that you know how to play it well.
What does being scrappy mean? Because like I think like oh am I
Mm.
being like ratchet? Am I like going out on the street and like hoeing myself out or like no I'm just playing. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of means well, I mean, the Asian American part of me and like the Christian part of me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more the Asian American part than the Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Has always been a little bit reticent or like
That was an SAT word. Can you
oh yeah.
can you use simpler words, please?
Hesitant
Okay,
or
okay.
like don't want to do,
Uh-huh.
like asking adults or asking what I would perceive as like more accomplished, busy people
Uh-huh.
for favors or to talk or like things like that.
Uh-huh.
But I think over time I've gotten more comfortable with that, and I guess that's what I mean by scrappy. Is just knocking on doors and asking people to talk or like help you out. And I've been surprised by how many people are just willing, if as long as you kind of you meet them halfway and you do a lot of the legwork yourself too.
Wow.
And you're just kind of like, hey, this is just kind of like what I need, or like, do you have a thought specifically on this, or can you help introduce someone for me? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I think
yeah.
that's kind of like that. requires no resources, no money,
Yeah.
but just a little bit of hustle to try and open up doors. And I think that's kind of what I mean by
A
scrappy.
little bit of courage and vulnerability
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And just being okay with no, and them like never getting back to you, and be like, that's okay. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
That takes
Yeah.
a lot of like personal awareness to do. Like to like get to a place where you're like not so like crucial on the answer and not so crucial about looking funny or like looking like a certain way, you know, or talking a certain like funny, you know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and that wasn't something that I think I've always been the case. Like, I've actually been very like hesitant to do that, as I said. But I think it's just kind of like being in the kind of environments that I've been in the past maybe 4 or 5 years, and seeing people do that, and like them being very successful with that, and like it actually not being a bad thing.
Wow.
I think observing other individuals that do that successfully has kind of taught me to try the same.
We've
Yeah.
wow, that was good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's we've circled back to the topic of environment. So I mean, this was just a passing thought. I'm like, well, you know, like I didn't have like that kind of a hard upbringing in the sense that like I wasn't worried about like providing for myself ever. And I was just like thinking one day, like, if that's the environment I need to be in to like learn those skills to like really be scrappy, like, do I need to like artificially create that like scenario for myself? Should I just like give everything away and just press the reset button? You know what I mean? So like, I guess the bottom line I'm trying to get at is like, for those who don't have those like characteristics from what you've seen, and I'm not expecting you to have the answer, but like from what you've seen, like what would you speak into those people to like gain those experiences and gain that like set of characteristics that makes you like an entrepreneur? Because some of these people have great ideas, they have that entrepreneurial fire, like there's more to life than this, but they don't have that like grit or like that scrappiness kind of like character to like go through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess on a strategic level or like a high level is like, I think you don't need to artificially create these environments. I think life is hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
And like, if you try to do anything in the world, in any place, it's like you're gonna come up against like resistance or like indifference. Like, people don't care what you say or want to do. And so, yeah, no need to artificially create it. The world is already hard. So I guess that would be one. And I guess like two is if like an individual has kind of always like gone through the well-trodden path, and their parents provided for them, they had help along there were always people that were willing to help along the way, and they feel like they haven't like exercised that muscle of like being rejected a lot or trying like new things where they fail at things. It's simply kind of like a choice of like, let me try it. And I think having a rational expectation that like you are going to fail, you're going to get no's, but just kind of like bracing yourself even before is like, at least for, I don't know, for the next 6 months, I'm going to give it a real fair shot and understand there's going to be a lot of failures and rejection along the way, but just doing it anyway. And I think most people will be very surprised to find that the person at the end of the 6 months will be a very different individual than the person that started out. I think experience changes people.
So having that like commitment that no matter what, I'm gonna stick to this for the next 6 months. Or
whatever timeline you set for yourself in terms of like, I'm gonna give this a fair shot.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like, whenever you've done that, did you ever do it alone, or did you have accountability? Like, how'd you keep yourself straight?
I think I kind of did things that I've always done it in life, which is kind of just like do it on my own.
Wow.
But I'm like realizing, even as I kind of try to now venture out into like doing a startup of my own, it's so much better if you have other people that are doing it with you. And so I think going forward, I definitely look to have other people, maybe even accountability. It's even better like when they're doing the same thing that you're doing. And even better if they're in physically the same area, just so that you can kind of have that sense of like community and environment, as you said. But yeah, at the very least, just kind of having somebody along for the journey, I think, is really helpful. It's good for the mental health and for the soul.
That's awesome.